Hi everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to Architectural Photography and Composition. For so many of these videos I have talked about the importance of photographing on axis, why it's the paradigm for Dutch painting and engraving, and it's my go-to starting point for photographing interiors and for signature shots. And we've discussed how important it is for overall graphic stability, for controlling wide-angle distortion, and especially for projects that have a lot of information in them, like industrial projects and what have you. But I thought it would be of value to discuss more thoroughly photographing off-axis, because there are some issues there that I think need to be taken into consideration when you do that. So we shoot off-axis to show volumetric relationships, to create movement and dynamism within the frame, and also, frankly, just to provide a variety in your overall presentation of your project, so that they're not all axial compositions. And whether or not it's interiors or commercial buildings, residential, streetscapes especially, which are off-axis, or landscape. Now, we've talked about this before, and I have in my video on basic shapes for architectural photography. One of them is an off-axis view, asymmetrical, with two facades with no balancing vertical. Another one is what I called streetscape shape number one. Again, it's with two facades, with a dominant facade, asymmetrical, with a border vertical, which is you show here in the house on Philip Johnson. And then the third one, the streetscape shape number two, which is one facade off axis, asymmetrical, and with a border vertical, which is often full height. It isn't in this case. So here are the decisions, here are the things that I think to think about when you are doing an off-axis shot. And I've broken them down into these: dominance, tonality, your position, and a balance with border verticals. So let's start with the first one. When you're shooting off-axis, you're looking at more than one facade. Which one is your primary facade? And that needs to be very clear in your image. Here it's obviously this facade, I'm showing a little bit here. Here it's this facade, I'm showing a little bit here. And Philip Johnson's house, here's my main facade, and I'm showing the secondary one here. The primary facade, you need to make sure that's really clear. So it may not always be the main elevation. Here's this little building. Here's my axial composition. This is my signature shot, but I've moved to the side to show the volume. I'm still showing this area as my dominant facade. Now I move around to the back of the house. This is not the most glamorous part, but it needs to be photographed because it's part of the overall documentation. Here, it is my main facade, and I'm showing the secondary facades. These are in shadow, and we'll talk about that. Here's the same facade with another side of the building. And again, though, this is the main facade, and it's very clear in my images which is the face I want you to look at. Now, the second aspect is tonality. And you want to have a clear separation of the facades with distinct tonalities. And this requires planning the right time of day. This is a good example of what happens when you don't. I've got, this is the dominant facade. There's more of it than here. But if you'll notice, this time of day, each of these facades is almost illuminated exactly the same, and what happens is the building flattens out. So this is the same building photographed at the right time of day. In this case, this is the dominant facade, but notice that I've got one area that's bright, one area that's darker, and you get a sense of volume, which you don't get if they're both illuminated exactly the same way. Now, there is a post-production fix if, for some reason or whatever, you can't hit it at exactly the right time of day. You can go and you can select, in this case, the secondary facade, carefully selected, and then you can darken it with levels or curves or brightness and contrast. Be careful though that you don't overdo it, that when you darken that facade, you still keep the overall tone, the overall light balance that you have in your shot. Number 3, and this is really important, the position that you take. All things considered, wide-angle lenses are not as good for off-axis views because of the inherent distortion. So you want to establish some kind of proportion for your main facade, whether it's a 1:2 or a 2:3, and then you determine your angle to achieve that proportion. 2 things to be careful. Again, we talked about this in earlier videos, is not to have the corner of the building in the middle, because your eye goes here and your eye goes here. And the other thing is to avoid equal widths of the facade, because that tends to be a pretty boring, pretty static kind of composition. So what do you do about that corner? Like we've discussed before, you subdivide via proportional systems. So once you know which is your dominant facade, and let's hope you're there at the right time of day where you've got the light on your main facade, the secondary facade is not as bright, you then have to determine how far back you're going to be. Everything here is okay. This is my main facade. It's brighter than the secondary facade, but I have a wide-angle lens, and because of that, I have this wicked distortion because it's a wide-angle lens and I'm really close. You know, wide-angle lenses are convex, and the closer you get to something, the more that distortion will happen. So in this case, to avoid that, I was able to back up and zoom in with a tighter lens, and that reduces this distortion. Or if you don't have a tighter lens, you can back up and then know that you're going to crop out the extra information that you really don't want. And then for number 5, the balance. If you can possibly back up even further, you can include a vertical or a full height vertical to balance this perspective. And notice as you back up, the roof is even less distorted. So it looks like this. This is the balance of the 2 facades off axis with a border vertical. I backed up, I don't have the distortion, and I have a full height vertical to balance this. Now, I have a little bit of a dark area here. If I didn't, I would darken that corner like the portrait photographers do to help frame my composition. So everything you backed up. The last thing you want to do is consider your eye height. Again, all things considered, the wider the lens, the lower your camera should be to avoid foreground distortion. And in this case, on this building, the streetscape, main facade in sun, I've got a full height vertical, and my camera, this is a 24mm lens, my camera is no more than about 20 inches off the ground. Here's another example. I'm really low to the ground. I want a monumental kind of feeling to this building, and I don't have a full height vertical here, so in post-production, I burned the corner a little bit, again, to give me a little bit of extra framing. Now, there is a post-production fix if you can't do any of these things, but you know that you've got something that looks like this and it's not right. You can select the top part of this building with the rectangular tool and then go to Edit, Transform, Distort, and bring it down to the point where you have much less distortion than you had here, and then go back and crop. We talked about this early on. If you have a really tall building and you've had to you had to shoot where your verticals weren't aligned. In post-production, you had to really pull on both sides and it squashed the building. You had to do another correction to reestablish the proper proportion. Well, this is the same kind of thing. You select it and then use edit, transform, distort, and crop it, and you will have a much more usable photograph. So here's uncorrected and here's corrected. Much, much better. So these are the considerations for your off-axis shots. Determine dominance, get the best time of day to differentiate tonalities, establish your position, determine your proportion, determine the best distance, fine-tune with eye height, and if you can, balance with border verticals if possible. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. If you have friends that are photographers who you think would be interested in what we're doing together, by all means, share the video with them. Let them know what we're doing. We're closing in on 12,000 subscribers, and I'm really grateful for this support. If you would like to support the channel, the videos are free. Consider purchasing a copy of my Architectural Photography and Composition. We have a second edition out now. We know technology changes. Photoshop today is not even the Photoshop of 2-3 years ago with the AI tools now with generative fill and the remove tool. But composition is still composition, and those compositional rules which were established 400, 500, 600 years ago, those still hold. So the new version of the book includes a discussion of what some of these new tools are. And also, please consider, if using a book is not your ideal and you would prefer to have me basically take you step by step by step, there's a 46 lesson course on Udemy, and we have a couple of bonus videos now, and it is really complete. If you are new to architectural photography, this is the place. I think this is the place to start. We cover everything, and if you're already a seasoned pro, from the emails that I get and from the notes that I get, even professionals who've been in this for some time find really valuable information here and review some of the things that they already know. So again, the videos are free. Consider purchasing a copy of the book and or purchasing a copy of the Udemy course. I think it'll help you with every aspect of your work. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.